There's a lot of conflicting advice online about cold calling. Some people say it's a complete waste of time, and others say it's a complete goldmine. I've been on both ends of the spectrum, so that's exactly why I'm making this video today to get my honest breakdown and to hopefully provide you some clarity. For context, my name is James, and I run an AI automation agency named Simply Voice AI, where we build AI receptionists for home service and service-based businesses. Believe me when I say I've tried just about every single outreach method over the past year. At the very beginning of my journey, I was heavily opposed to cold calling because I'd heard somewhere that it's a bad use of your time and it's bad for leverage. I only just started recently cold calling in January of this year, so 2026. The main reason why I switched from outreach methods like cold email was simply because that cold calling allowed me to have real conversations with business owners, validating that my offer was something that they actually needed. And just for complete clarity, this isn't me telling you that I've mastered the art of cold calling. I'm simply just going over everything that I've learned over the past few months, going from someone that's never picked up a phone to cold call to someone who's pretty comfortable now. There won't be many cuts in this video, just being completely honest, just because I kind of want to just be talking directly to you, explaining everything in all these processes. And like I said previously, before the start of this year, cold calling was something that I never wanted to touch just because I convinced myself that those people online that are saying that it was low leverage was right, just because, again, I was scared. So just going over everything and just to give complete context, I ran 2 different campaigns of cold calling, one with dental practices and one with home contractors. Originally, I'd wanted to have 2 different offers that I would give to one dental practices and home contractors because I saw them as 2 different niches that were highly valuable and could use my service. This in and of itself was also, some could say, a mistake just because I'm not being very specific and I'm not honing in on one ICP. So as you can see, for each campaign, we did about 250 calls each, totaling out to, like I said, the 500 cold calls. With them, obviously the connection rates aren't the greatest, but we'll get into that a little bit later as well. But some of the things that really do jump out immediately to me, or jumped out to me and Claude when we were reverse engineering everything that I could learn from it, was that the script itself didn't change too much, which obviously when the difference between a dental practice and a home contracting business, like, I don't know, let's just say a pool remodeling company, that would be very, very drastic and very different because they have different values and different things that are important to them. Another key thing that I overlooked was that dental clinics will 99% of the time have a receptionist working and someone at the front desk that's picking up the phone. So getting to the decision maker is like significantly harder than it is for contracting businesses. A lot of contracting businesses do also have receptionists, but you also do get a lot of contractors who have their personal phone number as the main line for their business that's on Google. So that also does really work in my favor because they do get a lot of calls, a lot of also spam calls, a lot of different things. So that's something that I learned that I could leverage later on. And then also, obviously, the main thing that is it's kind of like a double-edged sword, just because the idea that a lot of these contractors, they'll be out on jobs, and that's just the reality of it. And when they're out on jobs, they don't want to be picking up the phone. And if they do pick up the phone, a lot of times they're going to be annoyed, or they don't want to talk to someone trying to pitch them something while they're on a job and they're trying to work. And that is also something that I had to learn to deal with, just because, not even just deal with, it was something I learned how to handle properly, just because the idea that this is exactly why the service I'm selling is so valuable to them. So they don't have to take some time away from their business in order to to get more business, to get more money. So they're not losing money while they're still making money. And that just segues really nicely into my first major takeaway and point, which just comes down to picking the right industry. When you're just starting off, you don't need to be married to a niche, but if you're going to do something like cold calling, or even if you do cold email, you need to kind of double down and make sure that you're doing everything you can to become as familiar as possible with the niche that you're targeting, learning how to speak their language. If you have been in the industry, so like if you're a contractor, your dad was a contractor, I don't know if your uncle is a contractor, something like that, and you know the type of lingo they use, the type of problems they're running into, those are the industries that you want to target at first, just because you already have basically a foot in the door and a deeper understanding of it. Again, it's some of these little things that really do go a long way. So understanding little nuances, like if I would prefer to be called in the morning or in the afternoon or while I'm on a job site, coming from like obviously the perspective of the contractor that I'm calling, then obviously probably they wouldn't prefer to get called at all. But if they had to pick, they'd probably pick in the morning or after the job, not while they're on the job. Personally, I prefer to call them in the morning just because it just aligns with my personal schedule even better. And I could just get it out of the way, get my dials in and go on with the rest of my day. So like just understanding little nuances like that someone isn't going to want to pick up the phone, one at all, a lot of the time. So you have to sometimes be fighting for that conversation, but you have to put yourself in the best position to succeed by calling them at the best time where they'll be the most receptive, which is probably in the morning. The first major problem that we kind of just ran into, or something that I like realized going through all these calls with me and my team, was that voicemail is a big roadblock and a big problem, and that it's going to happen a lot of the time. It's just the nature of cold calling that there'll be a lot of voicemail. Just because a lot of time when you're calling from a random number, not everyone's going to want to answer, which is kind of confusing because it's a business. You would think that they would, but they don't. So with that, obviously with these numbers here, with my contractor campaign, 54% of the calls hit voicemail or an answering machine. In this case, I believe that it's a bunch of different factors. It wasn't just with the list building or other things like that. I think the biggest factor with this one was time of day. Like I said, I wasn't calling it the perfect or the best time of day. I wasn't utilizing that. This is something that I learned afterwards to like call in the morning. But with that, 54 is still really high. So over half the calls that I made there weren't even conversations that were had. It just went straight to voicemail. So with that, it's just not ideal to be having that because you can't even practice the script. You can't even see objections. You can't see if they're interested. You're spending a lot of time just dialing, hearing ringing, and then hearing voicemail. So that means 135 out of the 250 calls that we made in that campaign never actually reached a person. And the biggest issue with this wasn't the fact that it went to voicemail. It was that we didn't have a concrete script in place for voicemail, which just didn't work out, especially when it came to my team. When it's me making the call, I could think on the fly. I could think about what to say because it's my service, it's my product, and it matters the most to me. So with that, I could think on the fly and leave some sort of voicemail with value. When it came to my team and how I was outsourcing some of these calls, then there's no voicemail script enabled. So I'm paying for them to make these calls. And when there's no answer, it's just a hang up. I'm already paying for these calls, might as well just leave a voicemail or have a script. So that again is completely on me. It's something that I learned as I was going through. So having a good and adequate voicemail script ready, it just goes a long way and it goes a long spot. Because again, if even one or two of those people answer their voicemail and they give you a call back, then it's an interested lead. Then you have a discovery call booked and different things like that. Another major mistake or major learning point from this past few months of cold calling was just the not interested block. So a lot of times if you're giving someone a cold call or you're calling a business, the first thing they want to do is just get off the phone. Cold calling has a bad reputation. A lot of business owners don't like it. They see it as a waste of time, and a lot of time they're scared of getting burned by scammers or someone just doing some sort of telemarketing. So a lot of times before they even know anything you have to offer, once they get the vibes, it's a cold call, they'll let you know, hey, I'm not interested. So on the early calls especially, me and my team, we took that as, okay, let's get off the phone. Because like honestly, I was nervous in my first, I would say even sometimes I go into some calls and I'm still kind of nervous. But I was very, very nervous starting off. So like as soon as I heard I'm not interested or it sounded like the person was like agitated or irritated, I instantly just like, okay, my fault for calling you, and hung up the phone. But the thing is, when you're doing this, that when they're saying not interested before you even have a chance to pitch anything or to say anything, then at this point, you don't even know that they're not interested, or you're not even sure that your service is something that can be used. Because the biggest thing for these calls obviously it's to get clients, obviously it's to get booked calls, discovery calls, and all that. But to me, the biggest thing was to validate my offer. But every single time I hopped off the phone without even conversating about what my offer was, I was losing just important data and important time because I already spent the time to dial. I spent the time waiting for the ringer to go through. I spent the time saying hello, doing all this, and just for them to say not interested, and then I just gave up. I have nothing to lose in that case scenario. You've already done everything. You might as well just get it off. And if they're still very mad and they get angry and they hang up, then that's life. It's like, what more can you do? You did everything you could. You move on to the next call and you keep dialing. Like the things that we're trying to hear real objections, the objections that people do have. You could work with those. Saying I'm not interested is not a real objection. So you could, in a way, kind of work around it softly. Of course, you don't want to keep forcing the issue. So if someone says they're not interested without a reason, they just want to get off the phone. So you could just say something along the lines of, yeah, that makes sense. But like, I'm just asking, like, does anybody follow up on any calls that you miss when you're on a job or anything like that? And if they're just still like, yeah, bro, like, I don't really care, just like, please, like, hang up at this point. Because again, like, think about it logically. If someone gave you a call and you're like, I'm not interested, and they keep going, like me personally, I'm hanging up the phone. So if you're still talking to me on the phone at this point, then you have some interest into what I'm saying or to see where this conversation is going. Some people may be a little bit too nice, so it could be, you can see as taking advantage of their kindness. But again, it's a phone call. We're all grown-ups here. The world's not going to end because someone gave you a phone call. Another issue or thing that I ran into was just my list quality wasn't the greatest in my earlier runs. At first, I would just use some sort of Google Maps scraper, search up my ICP, so dental clinics, and I'm not sure, like San Francisco or something. and then just scrape the first however many, or not the first however many, but scraped 250 of them, moved them to Google Sheets, took out all the relevant information and left the name of the business and the phone number and the location of the business, and that was it. There that just because there's a lot of duplicates and different things like that. So you can see here, and some of them had no phone number either, which something that was just lazy on my part. Again, it's like obviously a learning moment. I'm learning live. I'm showing you guys mistakes that I'm making along the way, just so you could also not make the same mistakes and learn from me as well. But like I said, there's dead numbers, there are duplicates, even some closed businesses. So like that's just a waste of time. And if I'm paying for people to be making calls as well, that's just honestly just a waste of money. So it's just like things that are very avoidable. Those are things that they don't really hurt per se, but like in the long run, when you're trying to do this at scale, these are the things that can like really put a toll on your mental, because you're making all these calls, you're sitting there and it's like I just made a call. It's the fifth time I just made a call, and all of a sudden the business isn't even open anymore. So like that's just annoying. So for me, something else that had to do a little bit outside of just the initial realm of actually making the cold calls themselves was that my post-call process, especially for those that were interested. I didn't, at the time when I was making these calls, I was kind of just going step by step. I don't like going and planning out a master plan at the very beginning and then saying this is exactly how my perfect plan will be. I like just taking action and then figuring out as I go. And this is just a part of it. So like I'm not complaining about that. I'm just being transparent. With this, I didn't really have a concrete follow-up sequence. So that's where I feel like also a lot of the leads that I had that were interested, I lost them throughout the way just because I didn't have a follow-up sequence. It took about like 24 hours afterwards, just because the way in which that these calls are structured, when it wasn't me doing the calls, when I outsourced the calls, I would get the information late and then I would send out the email. And at this point, they didn't get a confirmation booking about the appointment that they had booked and all these other things. So it was on my part and my end again. All accountability is obviously on me with that in that case. So then it was just difficult to book them in and to do all of that. So in regards to like the booking process as a whole, my new rule of thumb would be I won't be booking anyone more than 3 days out. After I book them in or someone on my team books them in, we'll send a confirmation email just letting them know what to expect on the call. All this will be done within like 30 minutes of them even booking the call, because I want to personally send it out with everything and all of that. From there, it'll be the day before the call. So like I said, 3 days out, max 3 to 4 days before the call. And then if they no-show or whatever, because no-shows will happen, it's just a part of the game, then I will just send them a follow-up email or just give them another call. The biggest takeaway from this whole process of just doing my first few rounds, the first couple hundred calls for cold calling, was that more specific for me and my market is that there's still a market out there for it. It's not completely new. The reason I say this is because one of the big findings in this whole thing was honestly the best thing, not even a meeting that was booked. It was just the idea. One of the cold calls that there's an answering machine note that they already have an AI receptionist already. So it just shows that this is something that's real, something that isn't just fictional, something that isn't like me selling a dream or something fiction. This is something that businesses are implementing. So it shows that there's a demand for my product in that industry as well. So it just gave me a little bit more motivation going forward that like what I'm doing has an end goal and I'm not just pulling at straws here. The biggest things I'll be just going forward, just to recap. So just going over my list quality and making sure that it's as tight as possible, so I'm not wasting time or money with bad lists. And then having voicemail scripts ready to go and making sure the voicemail scripts are optimized to try and get people interested to give us a call back as soon as possible. And then also just email templates that are built and ready, just so after someone gets booked, they're nurtured accordingly so that they have the highest chance of showing up to the call. Just to end off the video, if you're unclear about what my stance on cold calling is when you're just starting off, I highly recommend it just because it allows you to have real conversations. Yes, it has its bad areas and its gray spots where you'll be making a lot of calls and someday you'll hit a lot of rude people. But when you have those good conversations, it really does a lot for you as compared to something like a cold email where you get a positive reply and then you have to go back and forth 5 different times to get them on a meeting. So just obviously every single outreach method works. They all have their ups and downs, and it all depends on what you're willing to do and what you're not willing to do. So with that, just choose accordingly, and I hope you choose correctly.